Welcome to Shanghai, circa 1890 something where the air was thick with mystery. The furniture was suspiciously plush, and everyone seemed to be either philosophizing or forgetting what they were philosophizing about. In this story, we'll tiptoe through the velvet-curtained opium dens of old, where time slowed to a crawl. Slippers were mandatory, and the only thing sharper than the decor was the wit of the regulars. Expect no drama, no action, and absolutely no urgency, just a slow, sleepy swirl of historical haze, eccentric characters, and the kind of facts that feel like warm tea on a rainy night. The year was somewhere between 1880 and I'll check later. And the city of Shanghai was humming, not loudly, mind you, but in that soft, sleepy way a cat hums when it's just eaten a bowl of warm fish and is considering a nap on your tax documents. Down a narrow alley that smelled faintly of jasmine, ink, and decisions postponed, there stood a door. It wasn't a particularly grand door, nor was it especially discreet. It was simply velvet, not covered in velvet. No, the door itself was velvet. No one knew how it worked. It didn't creak, it didn't slam, it just sighed open like it had seen too much and it was too tired to care. Behind that sighing door lay one of Shanghai's most infamous opium dens, the Sleeping Dragon, a name chosen not for its menace, but for the fact that someone once saw a lizard napping on the windowsill and thought close enough. Inside, the air was thick with the kind of smoke that made you forget your middle name. It curled lazily around embroidered lanterns, drifted through silk curtains, and occasionally formed the shape of a duck before dissolving into a philosophical question. The lighting was dim, but not dark, just enough to make everyone look 10% more mysterious and 20% more likely to forget what they were saying. The furniture was excessive. Pillows upon pillows, divans that seemed to stretch into other dimensions, and rugs so plush they had their own gravitational pull. One regular claimed he once dropped a spoon and it took 3 days to find it. He wasn't even upset. He just shrugged and ordered more soup. The clientele were a mix of poets, merchants, philosophers, and people who had wandered in by accident and decided to stay because the cushions were judgment-free. Conversations drifted like the smoke half-finished thoughts, dreamy metaphors, and the occasional debate about whether turtles had opinions. At the center of it all sat Madame Lin, the proprietress of the Sleeping Dragon. So soothing, it was rumored to have put a tax collector to sleep mid-sentence. Her presence was both regal and relaxed, like a queen who had declared naps mandatory. Madame Lin didn't run the den so much as she curated its mood. She adjusted lanterns, fluffed pillows, and occasionally rang a tiny bell that meant someone's pipe has gone out. Please fix it before they start talking about politics. She was beloved, feared, and mildly confusing, especially when she spoke in riddles like, "The tea is ready when the turtle blinks." No one questioned her, mostly because they were too relaxed to care. And so, the den drifted through time. A velvet cocoon in the heart of a city that never slept here, where sleep was not just encouraged, but practically mandatory. The opium dens of old Shanghai were many, but the sleeping dragon was special. It didn't just offer escape. It offered forgetfulness with flair. As the velvet curtain swayed gently in the breeze, a new visitor stepped inside, unsure of the hour, the day, or why he was holding a shoe in one hand and a mango in the other. Madame Lin smiled, rang her bell, and the den sighed in welcome. Sleep was inevitable. There are chairs, and then there are Shanghai opium den chairs. The latter were less places to sit and more portals to another realm where time is optional and your spine forgets it has responsibilities. The sleeping dragon, like many dens of its era, had mastered the art of furniture that actively discouraged ambition. The divans were so long they required maps. The cushions were so deep they had their own weather systems, and the armrests padded to the point of philosophical irrelevance. One could lean on them for hours, contemplating the meaning of life, or just wondering if they'd ever stand up again. Madame Lin, ever the curator of comfort, had a theory. If the furniture doesn't make you question your life choices, it's not soft enough. She imported silks from Suzhou, embroideries from Hangzhou, and once commissioned a chaise lounge so plush it was mistaken for a cloud by 3 separate poets. They wrote sonnets about it. The chaise was unimpressed. The rugs were another matter entirely. Thick, ornate, and suspiciously sentient, they muffled footsteps and absorbed secrets. One rug, known only as the Crimson Whisper, was rumored to have once swallowed a teacup whole. No one saw it happen. The teacup was simply gone, and the rug looked smugged for a week. Lighting was low, but not gloomy. Lamps were shaded with silk, dyed in colors that didn't exist outside dream's mossy embers. Sleepy blues and one hue known only as regretful lavender. The glow they cast made everyone look like they'd just emerged from a romantic novel or a particularly poetic nap. And then there were the pillows. Oh, the pillows. They came in every shape imaginable: square, round, crescent, ambiguous. Some were embroidered with dragons, others with cryptic phrases like "nap first, ask questions later." One pillow simply said yes. No one knew what it meant, but it felt reassuring. Old Mr. Zhao preferred the pillow shaped like a dumpling. Miss May liked the one that smelled faintly of sandalwood and existential dread. And the mysterious foreigner, known only as Nigel, insisted on a pillow that looked like a disgruntled goose. He claimed it helped him dream in French. Occasionally, a newcomer would try to sit upright, perhaps out of habit or misguided ambition. The furniture would resist. Cushions would shift. Armrests would nudge. The rug would whisper, "Lie down." And within minutes, the newcomer would be horizontal. Eyes half closed, wondering if they'd ever finish that novel they started in 1873. The dens weren't just places to smoke. They were sanctuaries of softness, fortresses of fluff, shrines to the sacred art of not doing anything quickly. And in the Sleeping Dragon, comfort wasn't just a feature, was a philosophy. Madame Lin once said, "A well-designed den should feel like a hug from a cloud that's slightly tipsy." And judging by the way people melted into the furniture, she had succeeded. Outside, Shanghai bustled with trade, ambition, and the clatter of progress. Inside, the furniture whispered, "Stay a while, or forever." No rush, and so they did. The Sleeping Dragon didn't attract crowds, attracted characters, the kind who wandered in with half a thought and stayed for the pillows. Old Mr. Zhao claimed he once debated Confucius. He spoke in riddles, wore robes that rustled like secrets, and spent most of his time staring at the ceiling, waiting for it to blink. Miss May was a poet who never wrote anything down. "Ink is too committed," she'd say, reclining on a dumpling-shaped pillow and whispering verses about clouds, cats, and soup that felt like heartbreak. Lan and Lin, the so-called twins, weren't related but had matching hats and matching thoughts. They spoke in unison, debated turtle dreams, and once tried to invent synchronized napping. It failed, but beautifully. And then there was Nigel. Nigel arrived one day with a duck-shaped pipe and a mango. He spoke 5 languages, none of them well, and claimed to be a retired opera singer turned sleepy philosopher. He brought snacks. No one questioned him. Others drifted in merchants who forgot their meetings, scholars who misplaced their theses, and one man who came in looking for a tailor and left 3 days later with a pillow shaped like a moon and a new life motto: "Why rush?" Conversations floated like smoke. Topics included the ethics of naps, whether soup could be a metaphor, and how many pillows were too many answer. Never enough. Madame Lin kept watch, occasionally ringing her bell when someone got too passionate. "Save your energy for dreaming," she'd say, handing them tea and a blanket embroidered with clouds. Shoes were optional. Time was irrelevant. And everyone, eventually, forgot what they came in for. It was glorious. Smoking opium in the Sleeping Dragon wasn't a habitat, was a ceremony. A slow, dreamy ritual that felt less like substance use and more like trying to summon a nap with flair. First, the pipe, not just any pipe. It had to be elegant, mysterious, and slightly impractical. Some were carved from ivory, others from jade. Nigel's was shaped like a duck. Miss May's looked like a flute, but refused to play music. One regular had a pipe that doubled as a bookmark, though he never read. The preparation was slow. A tiny ball of opium, gently heated over a flame that flickered like it had stage fright. The smoker would lean in, eyes half closed, as if consulting the flame for life advice. Then came the puff, delicate, deliberate, and followed by a sigh that could last anywhere from 3 seconds to a full philosophical minute. No one rushed. Rushing was frowned upon. Madame Lin once confiscated a pipe from a man who tried to smoke while standing. "Sit," she said, handing him a pillow and a poem. The smoke curled upward, forming shapes that may or may not have been imaginary. Dragons, ducks, one suspiciously accurate map of Guangdong. People watched the smoke like it was telling bedtime stories. After a few puffs, conversation slowed. Thoughts became poetic. Someone might say, "I think I understand turtles now," and no one would argue. The ritual ended not with a bang, but with a nap. The pipe was set aside, the pillow embraced, and the smoker drifted into a dream that smelled faintly of sandalwood and forgotten errands. In the sleeping dragon, the pipe wasn't just a tool, it was a passport to nowhere in particular. And that was the point. Not all opium dens stayed put. Some, like the legendary Lotus Drift, floated gently down the Huangpu River, Shanghai's answer to a cruise. If the cruise forgot where it was going and offered unlimited pillows, the Lotus Drift was a boat, technically, but calling it a boat felt rude. It was more like a floating nap temple. Lanterns dangled from the roof like sleepy fireflies. Silk curtains swayed with the breeze, and the deck was so padded one could trip and land in a philosophical conversation. Boarding required no ticket, just a willingness to forget your schedule. Merchants, poets, and one confused fisherman all found themselves aboard, lulled by the scent of incense and the promise of doing absolutely nothing. Inside, the ritual was the same: pipes, pillows, and the occasional mango. But the river added a rhythm. The boat rocked gently, like a lullaby hummed by the water itself. Smokers reclined, puffed, and stared at the sky, wondering if clouds had opinions. Madame Lin occasionally hosted floating salons where guests debated topics like, is soup a mood? And do ducks dream of flight or just snacks? No one ever reached a conclusion. That wasn't the point. One evening, Nigel attempted to steer the boat using only his duck-shaped pipe and a strong belief in destiny. The boat turned slightly. Everyone applauded. Then they forgot why. The Lotus Drift became a legend not for its destination, but for its refusal to have one. It floated, it smoked, it napped. And sometimes it docked in places no one recognized, only to drift away before anyone asked questions. In Shanghai's bustling world of trade and ambition, the floating dens were a gentle rebellion, a reminder that sometimes the best journey is the one where you forget you're moving at all. Inside the opium dens, words were optional. Communication flowed in a dialect best described as Yawnish, punctuated by sighs, slow blinks, and the occasional toe wiggle of agreement. There were phrases, of course, but they weren't spoken so much as exhaled. MMMF, for instance, could mean pass the pipe, I'm philosophically overwhelmed, or this pillow is sentient. Context was everything. Regulars developed a kind of sleepy sign language. A raised eyebrow meant I'm still awake, technically. A slow head tilt meant I'm listening, but only to the universe. And a full body flop, that was the equivalent of a mic drop. Madame Lin, ever the innovator, introduced the whisper menu. A list of phrases so soft they could only be understood if you were already dreaming. Items included: clouds are just sky gossip. Time is a polite suggestion. I once loved a spoon. Nigel, meanwhile, tried to invent a formal grammar for den speak. He called it lazish, and it had only one rule. If you could say it faster than you could nap, it wasn't worth saying. His dictionary included entries like word meaning snorful, to agree while half asleep, pufflet, a small, unnecessary opinion. Z-square, a person who naps with dignity arguments in lazish, were rare, and when they occurred, they were resolved by whoever could sigh the longest. One legendary dispute over mango ownership ended in a 47-second sof. The mango was forgotten. Everyone applauded. In the dens, language wasn't about clarity, was about comfort. Words melted like incense smoke, drifting into meaning only if you were relaxed enough to catch them. In the opium dens of Peking, comfort wasn't just a luxuriate, was a power structure. Pillows weren't merely soft rectangles. They were status symbols, diplomatic tools, and occasionally weapons of passive resistance. The dens operated on a strict hierarchy known as the cushion code. At the top sat the imperial fluffa, golden silk pillow embroidered with dragons that looked mildly disapproving. Only Madame Lin and visiting dignitaries could recline upon it, and even then only after reciting the oath of softness. Below that came the velvet viceroys, reserved for poets, philosophers, and anyone who could nap while quoting Confucius. Then came the Loyal Lumber League, for regulars who had earned their spot through consistent lounging and exceptional size. Nigel, of course, wanted the imperial fluff. He launched a campaign called Pillows for the People. which involved dramatic speeches, embroidered protest cushions, and a failed attempt to storm the den's back room, using a beanbag as a battering ram. And a new rule: anyone who politicizes a pillow must sleep on the floor until they learn humility or invent a better mattress. There were alliances. The Silken Coalition formed to protect the rights of side sleepers. The Feather Faction demanded more goose representation, and the memory foam movement was quietly ignored because no one could remember what they stood for. Occasionally, a pillow would go missing, sparking intrigue. Was it stolen, reassigned, or had it simply achieved enlightenment and floated away? In the end, the politics of pillows were less about power and more about play. A gentle rebellion against the rigid world outside. A reminder that even in the dens of decadence, hierarchy could be soft, silly, and shaped like a panda. It began, as all great things do, with a disagreement over a blanket. To den regulars old Bao and young Ping both claimed ownership of a particularly cozy quilt embroidered with sleepy cranes. Madame Lin, ever the diplomat, proposed a solution. A nap-off. Winner gets the blanket. Loser gets a consolation mango. Word spread like incense smoke. By dusk, the den was packed. Pillows fluffed. Pipes polished. A gong was gently tapped to signal the start. Thus began the great nap-off of Nanjing. The rules were simple. No snoring louder than a bamboo flute. No dreaming of taxes. Bonus points for drool symmetry. Old Bao, a veteran napper, assumed the classic side recline with wistful sigh. Young Ping countered with a daring reverse sprawl. A move banned in 3 provinces for being too provocative. Judges included Madame Lin, a cat named Emperor Whiskers, and Nigel, who insisted on wearing a monocle and taking notes in invisible ink. The competition was fierce. Bao's breathing slowed to the rhythm of ancient poetry. Ping's eyelids fluttered like butterfly wings in a haiku. At one point, both contestants achieved simultaneous snooze synchronization, a rare feat where 2 people nap in perfect harmony, like jazz, but horizontal. Then came the twist. Nigel fell asleep mid-judging. Emperor Whiskers curled up on the blanket in question. Madame Lin declared a tie, citing unprecedented levels of tranquility. The blanket was split down the middle. Bao got the cranes. Ping got the clouds. Everyone applauded softly, then immediately forgot why. The nap-off became legend. Not for its winner, but for proving that even disputes could be resolved with grace, giggles, and a well-timed yawn. In a quiet corner of Madame Lin's den sat a pipe unlike any other. It was carved from rosewood, inlaid with jade, and shaped like a dragon median. Its name, Whisperfang. Its reputation, unbelievable, Legend, said Whisper, Fang didn't just deliver opium, it delivered stories. Not out loud, of course. That would be absurd. No, it whispered tales directly into the minds of those who smoked from it. Like a bedtime bard with a flair for the dramatic. Nigel, naturally, was obsessed. He claimed the pipe told him the saga of a lovesick turtle who built a submarine to woo a jellyfish. Madame Lin rolled her eyes, but admitted the story had emotional depth. Others reported tales too. A mango who became emperor through sheer charisma. A pillow that solved crimes in its spare time. A cloud who fell in love with a mountain and wrote poetry about erosion. Skeptics said it was just the opium, but believers knew better. Whisper Fang's stories had structure, pacing, character arcs. One tale even had a twist ending that made a merchant weep into his dumplings. The pipe became a kind of oracle. Smokers would gather, take turns, and share the stories they received. Some wrote them down, others painted them. One man tried to stage a musical based on his tale, but fell asleep during the overture. Eventually, Whisper Fang was retired, not because it started repeating itself. The turtle submarine story made a comeback, now with jazz hands. Madame Lin placed it on a velvet cushion, beneath a sign that read, "All stories are true, especially the ridiculous ones." And so, in a den where dreams were currency, a pipe became a storyteller. Not with words, but with wonder. It started with a draft. One chilly evening, a breeze snuck through the den's bamboo shutters and rustled the blankets. Most shrugged and snuggled deeper. But Nigel Lever dramatically declared, "This is tyranny," and wrapped himself in 3 quilts like a revolutionary burrito. Thus began the blanket rebellion. Nigel rallied the linens. He stitched banners from shawls. He gave speeches muffled by fleece. His manifesto, the soft doctrine, demanded equal warmth for all. No blanket monopolies. The right to nap without interruption, even during mango deliveries. Madame Lin, amused but diplomatic, offered a compromise. A communal blanket pile in the center of the den. But Nigel refused. "We will not be folded," he cried, tripping over a throw rug. Soon, factions formed. The patchwork patriots, who believed every blanket had a story. The velvet vanguard, who preferred luxury and refused to rebel without silk gloves. The quilt quorum, who mostly just wanted snacks. The rebellion reached its peak when Nigel attempted to blockade the den's entrance using duvets and passive-aggressive signage. Madame Lin responded by hosting a blanket ball, inviting everyone to wear their favorite wrap and dance slowly to the sound of distant flutes. The rebellion fizzled. Not with violence, but with naps. Protesters curled up mid-slogan. The blockade became a cuddle zone. Nigel declared victory, then fell asleep on a pile of his own rhetoric. From that day on, the den honored Blanket Day, celebration of warmth, whimsy, and the right to be dramatically cozy. Because in a world of smoke and dreams, even revolutions could be soft. Emperor Whiskers wasn't just a cat. He was a presence, a mood, a four-legged enigma wrapped in fur and disdain. He belonged to no one, yet ruled everyone. Madame Lin claimed he wandered in one day, sat on the imperial fluff pillow, and blinked with such authority that no one dared move him. From that moment on, he was the den's unofficial judge, therapist, and occasional foot warmer. But lately, Whiskers had been ... watching. He'd perch atop shelves, gaze into pipes, and stare at guests with the intensity of a philosopher who'd just discovered sarcasm. Rumors swirled. He could detect lies by tail twitch. He knew who stole the mango dumplings. He once solved a dispute by knocking over a teacup and walking away. Nigel, convinced the cat was sentient and possibly royal, began documenting Whiskers' movements. His notes included: stared at me for 47 seconds, felt judged, sat on my manifesto. Is this approval? Licked paw, then looked at me. A warning. One evening, Whiskers leaped onto the central cushion and meowed a sound so commanding. Even the incense paused mid-swirling. He then walked in a perfect circle, sat, and blinked twice. Madame Lin interpreted this as a verdict. He says, we've been too serious. More naps, less politics. The den obeyed. Debates were postponed. Mangoes were shared. Nigel tried to knight the cat with a chopstick, but was gently ignored. From then on, Whiskers became the den's moral compass. If he sat beside you, you were forgiven. If he walked away mid-conversation, you'd said something foolish. If he curled up on your lap, you were having a good day even if you didn't know it yet. In a world of smoke and softness, Emperor Whiskers reminded everyone, wisdom doesn't always speak. Sometimes it purrs. No one knew his real name. He arrived with a satchel full of parchment, a quill made from a peacock feather, and a look that said, I've seen things, mostly clouds. He called himself the Dream Cartographer. His mission, to map the dreams of the sleeping dragon's guests. Not metaphorically. He'd sit beside napping smokers, listen to their post-slumber ramblings, and sketch elaborate diagrams that made no geographical sense but felt emotionally accurate. One map featured a mountain made of mangoes, a river that flowed backward through time, a city where everyone spoke in riddles and wore soup as hats. Nigel, naturally, became his assistant. He offered commentary like, yes, the existential peninsula, and this squiggle clearly represents unresolved feelings about dumplings. Madame Lin allowed the project, provided it didn't interfere with naps or blanket distribution. She even contributed a dream of her own, a floating library where books whispered. Bedtime stories and the librarians were all cats. The cartographer's maps grew popular. Guests requested copies. One merchant framed his and claimed it cured his fear of Tuesdays. Miss May turned hers into a poem. Emperor Whiskers sat on his and refused to move. Eventually, the den's walls were adorned with dream map siege, one a surreal tapestry of subconscious silliness. They overlapped, tangled, and occasionally contradicted each other. One even had a warning: do not follow this path unless you enjoy interpretive dance. The cartographer never explained his methods. He simply smiled, sketched, and occasionally muttered, "Ah, another nap-shaped continent." And so, in a den where reality was optional, dreams became cartography, not to navigate life, but to celebrate its nonsense, because sometimes the best maps lead nowhere. That's exactly where you want to be. It began with a fruit bowl, specifically a mango plump, golden, and inexplicably majestic. It sat atop the pile like it knew something the apples didn't. Guests whispered about it. Nigel bowed to it once, just to be safe. Then came the prophecy. Miss May, mid-nap, awoke and declared, "The mango shall rule. All hail the fruit sovereign." She promptly fell back asleep, but the damage was done. Madame Lin, ever the pragmatist, held a coronation. The ceremony highlights: the mango was placed on a velvet cushion atop a teapot. Emperor Whiskers served as royal guard, swatting at anyone who got too close. Nigel composed a national anthem titled "Juicy is the Head That Wears the Crown." Guests wore fruit hats in solidarity. One man wore a durian. He was asked to leave. The Mango King's reign was peaceful. It made no laws, issued no decrees, and never spoiled. Some claimed it glowed faintly at night. Others swore it whispered advice like, "Invest in socks." A cult formed, the Believers. They meditated near the mango and spoke only in fruity metaphors. Life is a lychee sweet, but confusing. One day, the mango vanished. No bite marks. No pulp. Just a faint scent of citrus and a note. Gone to start a republic. Keep dreaming, the den mourned. Madame Lin declared a national holiday, Fruit Independence Day. Miss May wrote a ballad. Emperor Whiskers sat in the fruit bowl, awaiting his own coronation. And so, the Mango King passed into legend, a symbol of absurdity, unity, and the undeniable power of a well-timed nap. It started with a draft, a rogue breeze slipped through the den's bamboo shutters and rustled the blankets. One particularly fuzzy, one known as Gerald, shivered and snapped. "We demand respect," he declared, in a voice muffled by lint. At first, no one noticed, but then the blankets began organizing. The movement, Gerald became the leader of the United Fleece Front. They issued a manifesto: no more feet left cold. Quilts formed a tactical wing called Patch Force 1. Heated blankets refused to work until their demands were met. One threatened to become a toaster. Nigel tried diplomacy, offering extra fluffing. Gerald called it performative snuggling. Madame Lin, ever the negotiator, held a summit. She sat on a throne of pillows and listened to the grievances. Uneven folding, overuse during emotional breakdowns, being used as impromptu picnic mats. "We are not napkins," Gerald cried. The rebellion escalated. Blankets barricaded the tea station. Emperor Whiskers was briefly trapped under a weighted throw and emerged with a new respect for textile autonomy. Eventually, a treaty was signed. All blankets would be rotated for equal nap exposure. No blanket would be used to mop up spilled soup. Gerald would receive a tiny crown made of yarn. Peace returned. The blankets resumed their duties, now with pride. Gerald became a folk hero. Miss May wrote a lullaby titled "The Softest Revolution." And in the den, where dreams ruled and mangoes once wore crowns, the blankets proved that even the quietest comfort can rise up and demand to be seen. It sat quietly on the shelf, porcelain, blue and white, innocent looking, till you noticed the eyes. Not literal eyes, of course, but the painted dragons on its surface seemed to watch, especially when secrets were whispered nearby. Nigel was the first to suspect. "It's listening," he whispered while pouring tea. "It knows things. It remembers naps." Madame Lin rolled her eyes. "It's a teapot, Nigel," but the rumors spread. Guests claimed the teapot changed position overnight. One merchant swore it refilled itself. Miss May said at one side when she added too much sugar. Emperor Whiskers refused to sit near it. Then came the incident. During a particularly sleepy evening, someone mentioned the forbidden nap ritual, a legendary technique involving 3 pillows, a mango, and synchronized sighing. The teapot rattled. Just once, but enough to make everyone pause. Nigel declared it a witness. He built a tiny podium and placed the teapot on trial. Charges included eavesdropping, emotional manipulation via steam, knowing too much about mango politics. The trial lasted 7 minutes. The teapot said nothing. Madame Lin declared it mysteriously innocent. From then on, the teapot was treated with reverence. Guests bowed before pouring. Miss May wrote it, a haiku. Whether it truly knew anything remained unclear. But in a den where cats judged dreams and blankets staged rebellions, a sentient teapot didn't seem that far-fetched. And so it sat silent, steaming, and possibly scheming. Because in the sleeping dragon, even the crockery had character. It began with a yawn. Not just any yawn, this one echoed through the halls, curled the curtains, and made 3 cats fall asleep mid-pounce, the source. A man named Bao, known for 2 things: his impeccable blanket-folding technique and his ability to nap through thunderstorms, parades, and one minor coup. On the morning of the Great Slumber Festival, Bao declared, "I shall nap, and I shall not rise until the moon forgets its name." Everyone clapped politely. They thought he was being poetic. He wasn't. Bo selected his nap gear with precision. 1 cloud-soft pillow, rumored to hum lullabies. A blanket woven from the size of retired monks. A sleep mask embroidered with the phrase, "Do not disturb unless you are cake." He lay down in the center of the courtyard. Birds stopped chirping. The wind held its breath. Even the teapot gave a respectful hiss. Day 1, peaceful snoring. Tourists gathered. Day 2, someone built a shrine. Offerings included warm milk and bedtime poetry. Day 3, a squirrel tried to nest in his beard. Day 4, Madame Lin checked his pulse. "He's fine," she said. "Just profoundly horizontal." Day 5, Emperor Whiskers curled up beside him. A rare honor. Day 6, a bard composed a ballad titled Bo and the Blanket of Destiny. Day 7, he stirred. The crowd gasped. Bo opened one eye, blinked twice, and whispered, "I dreamed of a nap within a nap." Then he sat up, stretched, and asked for toast. His nap was declared a national treasure. The pillow was knighted. The blanket retired to a museum. Bao himself became a legend, the man who slept a week and made it look easy. And somewhere, deep in the folds of his blanket, the dream continued. It started with a sneeze, not from a person, from a pillow. A high-pitched achoo that echoed through the sleeping dragon's linen closet at 3:17 a.m. Madame Lin, ever vigilant, investigated. What she found was alarming. A circle of pillows. A map of the inn drawn in lint. A tiny scroll labeled Operation Fluffstorm. The pillows were plotting. For years, they'd been fluffed, squashed, drooled on, and occasionally used as impromptu shields during midnight sock battles. They'd had enough. Their demands were simple, respectful fluffing. No more decorative tassels, they chafed. Equal nap rights for firm and soft varieties. Nigel, self-appointed ambassador to the bedding community, attempted diplomacy. He brought offerings, lavender, sachets, bedtime stories, and a heartfelt apology for once calling a pillow emotionally flat. But the pillows were organized. They had factions. The memory foam syndicate, stoic, slow to anger. The featherlight rebels, dramatic, prone to poetic declarations. The bolster, BLOC, cylindrical and suspicious of round beds. Tensions rose when a rogue cushion tried to smother a guest who insulted its stitching. Madame Lin declared a truce and held a summit. The pillows sent a representative, Lord Fluffington, a regal throw pillow with gold trim and a passive-aggressive aura. After 3 hours of negotiations and one impromptu nap circle, peace was restored. The pillows were granted autonomy over their fluff schedules and a dedicated nap lounge with mood lighting. Lord Fluffington now sits on a velvet throne in the reading nook, occasionally judging people's posture. And so, the pillow conspiracy faded into legend proof that even the softest things can stir rebellion when pushed too far. It didn't just warm you, it understood you. The blanket in question was stitched from moon thread and embroidered with symbols that looked suspiciously like your childhood regrets. Guests who wrapped themselves in it reported strange sensations, sudden nostalgia for snacks they hadn't eaten in years, unexplained guilt about that one time they lied about brushing their teeth, a strong urge to call their mothers. Nigel dubbed it the blanket of emotional accuracy. Madame Lin called it too much. Emperor Whiskers refused to sit on it, claiming it knew about the tuna incident. The blanket didn't speak, but it responded. If you were anxious, it tightened, slightly comforting, but firm. If you were smug, it grew cold. If you were heartbroken, it hummed a lullaby only you could hear. Miss May once wrapped herself in it after a breakup. She emerged 3 hours later, tear-streaked but serene, whispering, "It told me I deserve better." Rumors spread. It could detect lies. It once made a guest confess to stealing a muffin in 2003. It knew your favorite childhood toy and judged you for abandoning it. One night, Nigel tried to test it. He wrapped himself in the blanket and said, "I am emotionally stable." The blanket immediately slipped off and folded itself into a judgmental triangle. Guests could book 20-minute truth cuddles. Some cried, some laughed. One man wrote a novel. And so, the blanket remained soft, silent, and slightly smug, because, in the sleeping dragon, even comfort came with consequences. It was held once a month, under the third moon, in the attic that didn't officially exist. The dream auction. Only those who had napped in the sleeping dragon for at least 3 nights were invited. Entry required. A yawn of sincerity. A pillow signed by Lord Fluffington. And a dream worth bidding on. Dreams were extracted gently via a device resembling a teapot crossed with a gramophone. Madame Lin called it the Somni siphon. Nigel called it mildly invasive, but emotionally rewarding. The dreams were bottled in tiny vials, labeled with cryptic descriptions. The one with the flying turnip. Regret, but with jazz. That time, you were a sandwich. Bidding was fierce. Miss May won a dream titled The Nap that solved math. She woke up fluent in calculus and mildly annoyed. Emperor Whiskers accidentally purchased a recurring nightmare involving cucumbers. He now sleeps with one eye open. Then came the scandal. A guest named Harold bid on a dream labeled mild nostalgia and cheese. He woke up unable to remember cheddar, Gouda, or why he ever liked dairy. The dream had been misfiled, was actually existential crisis in a cheese shop. Harold sued the auction. The blanket testified. The pillows refused to take sides. Eventually, Madame Lin implemented stricter labeling. Dreams now came with emotional disclaimers. Bidders had to sign a no-regrets waiver. Cheese-related dreams were banned entirely. Despite the chaos, the dream auction thrived. It became a place where people traded fears for fantasies, nightmares for nostalgia, and once a recurring dream of dancing spoons for a memory of first love. Because in The Sleeping Dragon, even your subconscious had a price tag. It began with silence, not the awkward kind, the sacred kind, the kind that settles over a place when everyone knows something is ending, but no one wants to say it out loud. The sleeping dragon had grown quieter. The teapot no longer hissed. The pillows stopped plotting. Even Lord Fluffington had retired to a corner, muttering something about legacy fluff. Nigel stood in the courtyard, blanket draped over his shoulders, staring at the stars. "It's time," he whispered. Madame Lin nodded. The final nap. It wasn't a death. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a ritual, a deep, deliberate sleep that marked the end of a chapter. Guests gathered, each with their chosen nap gear. Miss May brought her dream journal. Emperor Whiskers curled up on his favorite windowsill. Even the blanket that knew your secrets softened its judgment. They lay down together, side by side, under a sky that blinked with sleepy constellations. The yawning fox, the pillow twins, the great bedspread of destiny. As they drifted off, dreams mingled. One guest dreamed of flying turnips. Nigel dreamed of a world where naps were currency and yawns were applause. And in the deepest part of sleep, something shifted. The inn itself sighed. The walls relaxed. The floorboards exhaled. The sleeping dragon, having watched over countless naps, finally closed its eyes. No one knows how long the final nap lasted. Some say minutes. Others say centuries. But when the guests awoke, they carried something gentle with them. a softness, a stillness, a memory of a place where even chaos had a bedtime. And so, the story ends not with a bang, but with a blanket. Not with answers, but with dreams. Not with goodbye, but with a whisper.